The Crow was directed by Alex Proyas and celebrates its 30th anniversary today. As of 1 minute ago, when you're watching this video, it is past midnight. And this is a movie that I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, but it felt like the right opportunity to talk about it. What with the 4K re-release happening just this past week, as well as a theater re-release happening at the end of the month for a couple of days. If you get a chance to see it on the big screen, definitely take that. I actually have to think about this for a minute, but I don't think I've ever properly sat down to watch The Crow, and I think a lot of that has to do with, just not being, ready to watch it. It's not just the reality of it, but it's sort of a mental thing. Sometimes you need to be in a headspace to watch a movie, and even though this is a comic book movie, and that's something that's right up my alley, it's not exactly a comic book movie of the normal sort now, is it? It's not like a Spider-Man movie or something like that. I don't think I really need to go into the story of what The Crow is about, but in case you're somebody who doesn't know, it is about Eric Draven, played by the late Brandon Lee, who is brought back to life a year after his death, and his fiance's death as well, who was beaten and raped and murdered. And in a pursuit for revenge, he tracks down the gang that did it, which is led by a guy named Top Dollar, played by Michael Wincott, and he starts taking out those gang members one by one. It's a pretty grisly and hyper-violent movie that a lot of people have seen over the years, but it's hard to watch this movie without feeling haunted to some degree. Of course, as many of you may know, this is Brandon Lee's final movie, and he unfortunately died while making the movie. While he was filming it, a scene which involves him getting shot by a prop gun, that gun had a lodged bullet in there from earlier, and in a case of extreme negligence, that's the gun that Michael Massey, the actor who plays Fun Boy, was handed, and unfortunately that shot went off, and the force from that hit Brandon Lee, the two shots that is, and it hit as much as a real bullet would, and unfortunately that is what ended his life. But what makes it even more eerie is his father, Bruce Lee, also died at a very young age, and it was also right before a very major release of his, that being Enter the Dragon, and so there is this aspect of it that just makes it even more eerie. But it also makes watching this movie a lot more haunting, because even though the story itself is one that is incredibly tragic, knowing that you're seeing Lee's final days on the big screen like that, there is something about it that really does sort of, leave you unsettled after the viewing is done. And I know that the movie went through some rewrites and restructuring after the fact, but it doesn't change the fact that there is something about it that even when he's talking about, certain things that he valued with Shelley, his now dead fiance, there are these aspects of it that just really do leave that kind of an impact on you.
It's funny. Little things used to mean so much to Shelley. I used to think they were kind of trivial. Believe me, nothing is trivial.
And as Draven, Brandon Lee is phenomenal. You can't help but also look at this role and go, this is an actor who would have been something incredibly remarkable. He'd already done a few movies before this, but in so many ways, this would have been that one role that everybody saw him, and this guy is someone to watch out for. He has this star-making presence on screen that every single time he's in frame, he just absolutely takes over, and it's a brilliant performance, and one that rightfully has earned its place among filmgoers and fans of the, film medium in any way. It's just, this is a really, really memorable final turn. It's just incredibly tragic we could not get to see more of that. I actually feel in this situation also bad for Massey, the actor who had the prop gun. It's not his fault, and he has talked about it, and he's now no longer with us, but he talked about how he lived with that pretty much till the end. And it's incredibly sad to think about that, because of course that's not something that you kind of move on from. But make no mistake, it's not just the aspect of reality that makes this movie effective. It is the fact that it is a very well-made movie. Proyas has done a lot of stuff when it comes to neo-noir or noir genre in itself. This one was more gothic noir. After this he did Dark City, which was very neo-noirish. And he's got an excellent flair for visuals that is very prevalent over here. So many starkly dark, contrasted images in here, and yet those bursts of color really come through in spades whenever they're in effect. Like when you see some of the scenes in play over here, especially the one where Eric is wailing on his guitar and then smashes it on a roof, that entire scene is beautifully framed. But really the action and just the sequences where he's running across rooftops, or the action when he's, when it's up close, or it's just these wide shots, beautifully executed stuff. Or even just when it's raining, that mood, the way it captures that, Dariusz Wolski's cinematography is remarkable. This is very much a movie that got everything right so well in that first run. And I say first run for a reason. I'll get to that in a bit. It also has a brilliant soundtrack, which is extremely of its time, but it just works so well with the entire movie. That whole metal, hard rock, grungy scene, which is dripping from it. The performances from the supporting characters like Ernie Hudson, Rochelle Davis, the incredibly seedy Top Dollar by Michael Wincott, this absolute creep of a human being who's got a very incestuous relationship with his half-sister. Really, really crazy stuff, and it's just a very intricately crafted world, and immediately it gives you that sense. I mean, visually speaking, yes, but also thematically and how it sets up all of that. Immediately, this is a world where police is not really going to do much. Criminals run the street, and with Devil's Night once a year, you already know there's going to be at least more than 100 fires caused, because you can just kind of get away with that. That's kind of the thing that's used when it comes to describing how Eric Draven himself did not make it at the end of that night. And it is a very powerful movie when all of those elements are combined together. It's a simple story. A man is out to get revenge after coming back to life thanks to a crow, and he has those abilities, and he can take a lot of hits and nothing happens, and yeah, that's it. That's the story. And it does a very effective job with that story. You don't need it to be overcomplicated. It doesn't try to do more than it needs to. It keeps it simple and to the point. Now, like I said, at this first go, it was great. Because as of this recording, yes, there is a remake coming. In fact, it's going to be in August with Bill Skarsgård. I don't think you need to remake this. And it's not just because of, the reality of it or the tragedy with Brandon Lee. It's just because sometimes I feel like you get something so right and it's so good that first time, you don't really need to do it again. I think with Eric Draven, I think the interpretation that you got over here is pretty spot on to the comic book. So I just don't think there's a particular need for it. I will give it the benefit of the doubt, but I also think it's something that's a very tough thing to do because, now that bringing back the real context into it, there is something about that is inescapable. People will ask if this is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. I would say, yeah, it really does shoot up the list over there. I mean, this is such an intricately well-crafted movie. You can't help but just be in awe of so much of it and so much of the craft that's on display over here. Really, the film does an excellent job of making sure every single thing in it lands. Whether it's the smaller moments, which like Eric has already talked about, those little bits like talking about how it can't rain all the time, that triggers Sarah's memory into how Eric sang about that. Those little things really do matter. And the movie is built on that so wonderfully. And it's one that I absolutely love. I mean, the pain that Eric goes through, especially by touching, he can relive certain memories. Also really, really well done. That really comes in handy at the end of the movie when he's fighting Top Dollar and he gives him 30 hours of pain, which his fiancée suffered, and that's what eventually topples him over and he manages to kill him, which was also really, really affecting stuff. And I think it's a movie that is definitely worth talking about more and more as the years go by. I'm glad it's had the legacy that it has had over the last 30 years. And I'm hoping that going forward it continues to have that legacy. It just is interesting because this video is the second one in less than a year where it feels like more of a eulogy than an actual talking, discussion about it. The other one was Mask of the Phantasm when talking about Kevin Conroy. There is just something about that which, it's inescapable. But at the end of the day, I love this movie, and, rest in peace to Brandon Lee, and yes, absolutely worth all recommendations. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you guys think of The Crow. If you've seen the movie, if you've not seen the movie, how special it is to you, etc., etc. We would love to hear your thoughts. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.